Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Joint Town Council, Parking Authority, and Redevelopment Agency meeting of October 17th, 2011. I'd request at the beginning of the meeting if you would turn off your cell phones or turn them to mute. That would be very good. We'd appreciate that. And I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Vice Mayor Steve Rice.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Joe Przinsky.
Here. Well, as is our tradition, we have the opportunity to have a couple of young leaders in our community with us this evening to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask Devin Schreiner to stand, please. Devin, stay where you are. Okay. And Jade Schreiner, would you stand? Turn around and take a look at your public. Okay. Okay. I want to say a few things about these young ladies before they lead us in the pledge. First of all, they're both fifth grade students at Daves Avenue Elementary, and they're both 5-year members of the Girl Scouts. Devin was a member of the student council in 4th grade, and both Devin and Jade volunteer for Second Harvest Food Drive, various community service activities through the Girl Scouts, such as the Christmas caroling at nursing homes and selling of cookies for charitable organizations. They've collected personal hygiene items and food to send to troops in Iraq, and they've collected blankets and dog toys for the animal shelter. Both Devin and Jade play basketball and soccer. Devin plays drums, third-year dancer in jazz, hip-hop, and she is with the dance company, and she loves to sing. Jade is also a third-year dancer in jazz and hip-hop with the dance company, loves tumbling and singing, loves art, both drawing and collage. Both Devin and Jade are founding members of the pop band Second Son, and I'm sure you've got many of their albums right now in your collection. Devin is enrolled in Improv Workshop 101 for young actors. Devin would like to be an actress when she grows up. And Jade teaches herself piano by listening to top 40 tunes, and she would like to be an artist when she grows up. So we have 2 budding artists with us tonight, and we'd ask both of these young ladies to come up to lead us in the pledge. Very good. Okay. Now stand. The flag's right over there. Here's your mic.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's hear it for our pledge leaders. Thank you, ladies. A gift for you. And if you hold down, if you take them in hand, see what's next to them.
You even did the pledge.
I know.
Did you know that?
Yep. Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you. And as you can tell, the parents of these 2 young ladies are standing here, welcoming them back. Let's thank them for bringing the girls with them. That was great. And as Councilwoman Spector pointed out, they actually led the pledge in harmony. So there is no closed session report tonight. And so I would ask that if you do intend to speak tonight in our public testimony portion of the agenda, please fill out one of those buff cards that are in front of you and bring it to our clerk over here to my left. And we would very much appreciate that. Next item on our agenda is council and town manager reports. I have a report. First of all, I want to commend the members of our CERT team. They were in the neighborhoods this Sunday, informing our residents of the significant issues relative to disaster preparedness. They were at 4 markets and 1 hardware store, and I visited each, and they all said that they had a great time, and there's a lot of good response. And you know, one of the things we're focusing on this year is disaster preparedness, and we really want to thank our community emergency response team under the leadership of Sergeant Carrie Harris, who's with us tonight as well, because they're a great team. And just a reminder to all of us that we really want every member of our community prepared for disaster. And if you access the emergency preparedness site on the town website, much more information is available to you there. That's the first item I wanted to mention. The second is that tomorrow we have a special event taking place at the site of our Los Gatos Creekside Sports Park. Currently, it is basically a parking lot. But after tomorrow, we're going to make sure that we have the first shovels in the ground, and we invite every member of the community who would like to participate to come to 9:30 University, and the event will start at 3:30. It should be great fun. We're going to have a lot of kids there to join us in our groundbreaking. And so it's one more thing that's a wonderful start for our community. And then finally, just to remind all of us, today is October 17th. And in 1989, October 17th was the Loma Prieta earthquake. Some of members of the audience may not have even been born by that time, but others of us who were here, I'm sure we remember what we did and how we felt as clearly as if it were yesterday, because it was a major emergency for us. And another reminder that we really do need to be prepared for our own protection and that of our families in the case of a major emergency. So let's just remember how we went through a very traumatic event. We recovered, and we can't be complacent in how we prepare for the next big one, which apparently, from all that we can tell, is inevitable. That is my comments on council matters. Any other members of council wish to say anything? Seeing none, then manager matters.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, just a few items to report. First, it's my good pleasure to introduce a member of the staff who I'll ask to stand, Mr. Steve Souza, who is our Public Works Inspector. He is the talent that's being recognized by the executive team this month and joining our regular meetings and joining your meeting tonight. Steve has been with the town for about 5 years, previously worked in the private sector with one of the major construction firms in the Valley, was born and raised here in Santa Clara County, and currently works for Parks and Public Works in the engineering division, providing engineering inspections and coordination for all of our public works projects, including the many street projects that are currently underway. So this is just a chance for the council and the community to recognize the exceptional work of Mr. Steve Souza.
Welcome, Steve. Thank you.
In addition, I wanted to highlight a couple other calendaring items. This Thursday at the History Club, just up Main Street towards the Boulevard, will be our annual police recognition lunch, starting at 11:30, to recognize not only members of the department, but of the community who have played a key role this last year in enhancing and increasing public safety for our community. And then on a save the date basis, we wanted to encourage the community to save Saturday, February 11th at 10 a.m. for the grand opening of the new Los Gatos Library on time and on budget, thanks to the direction and leadership of the council. Finally, today is Bosses Day. And just on behalf of all the town staff, we want to thank our 5 collective bosses sitting here in front of us, the mayor, vice mayor, and council, for your leadership and support of the staff organization over the last many years and years ahead. Thank you. state gift laws prohibit a more appropriate and formal recognition of your leadership, but we did want to call you out since today does happen to be a council meeting day and bosses day, and that happens rarely. Last, in recognition of the Loma Prieta earthquake anniversary that the mayor mentioned previously, I wanted to introduce tonight's Did You Know? With Sergeant Carrie Harris to discuss emergency preparedness evacuation planning for the community of Los Gatos. Sergeant Harris?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Tonight's Did You Know presentation is about the town's wildfire and flood inundation zone evacuation plans. On October 20th, 1991, 20 years ago this week, 25 people were killed and nearly 3,800 residences were destroyed when a wildfire swept through the heavily developed Oakland and Berkeley Hills. The conditions found at that site and those of the hillside zones of Los Gatos are strikingly and dangerously similar. Heavy vegetation, narrow roadways, steep topography, and significant residential development make wildland fire not only a likely occurrence here, but one with risk of tragic consequences. Less likely, but one with even greater consequences, would be a failure of the Lenahan Dam at Lexington Reservoir. While studies show that the reservoir and the dam is seismically sound, the catastrophic collapse of the dam after an earthquake would inundate a large portion of Los Gatos at speeds and depths that would certainly result in many casualties. Water District inundation maps show that a rapid failure of the dam with a full reservoir would release a surge of water that would reach the Main Street Bridge in approximately 6 minutes and would have a high water level that would reach Los Gatos Boulevard at Loma Alta on the east and North Santa Cruz Avenue at Main Street to the west. Nearly all of the area between North Santa Cruz, Winchester, and Los Gatos Boulevard would be covered with a fast-flowing mass of water and debris. To address those issues, plans to evacuate wildfire-prone areas and dam failure inundation zones have been established. The fundamentals of the wildfire evacuation plan is that primary and secondary escape routes have been identified and that signage marking those routes will be installed. Additionally, that a public education campaign will prepare hillside residents to be familiar with those evacuation routes and that they maintain fire-safe properties and that they should comply with evacuation orders when issued. The flood inundation plan establishes the east-west traffic arterials of Main Street, Saratoga Avenue, Blossom Hill Road, and Lark Avenue as the routes to the designated safe zones of Los Gatos Boulevard in North Santa Cruz, Winchester. Signage will be installed providing that direction. Again, a public awareness campaign for residents and businesses in the affected area will be conducted. A variety of evacuation notice or alert methodologies are available to us, including Alert SCC, our telephone emergency notification system, the emergency alert system on public broadcast radio, vehicle-mounted public address systems, or door-to-door contacts by emergency responders. The bottom line is that with the implementation of this program, we will have achieved a quantum step forward in providing comprehensive emergency preparedness services to our community. Thank you for your support in making it a reality, and I'm prepared to answer any questions if I may.
Thank you, Sergeant Harris. Any questions from council or comments? Thank you very much. We appreciate everything that you've done for this program, and again, we need to pay close attention to what Sergeant Harris has been reviewing for us over the last several months, because it really does make a major difference for us in terms of the next event that might occur in our community. All right, and that brings us then to consent items. This is the items that can be acted on in a single motion. And I'd ask if there's any member of the council who wishes to pull an item from consent. Seeing none, is there any member of our public who wishes to pull an item from consent? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
It's been moved, and is there a second?
Second,
All right.
noting for the record that I will be voting no on number 3.
Okay, so Councilwoman Spector will be voting no on number 3.
Mr. Mayor, I'll also be voting no on number 3.
All right, so Councilmember Leonardis will be voting no on number 3 as well. So we have a motion and a second to approve the items with those noted from the dais. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. And that brings us then to verbal communications. This is an opportunity for any member of our public to speak to any item not on tonight's agenda. This would be your opportunity, if you've got some issue you'd like to raise for the council, to speak to that issue. But please know that since it's not agendized per se, that we cannot engage in discussion of this, but we duly know what you have to say. We have one verbal communications request from a Michael Verga.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Mike Verga. I live at 46 Broadway Avenue. My property backs up to the downtown district and is within approximately 100 yards of the Los Gatos Bar and Grill. The Los Gatos Bar and Grill is currently routing their patrons from the front entrance on Santa Cruz Avenue and using the back stairs and deck for their entrance into the bar. This is a violation of their conditional use permit, but more importantly, it is having a detrimental effect on the neighborhood. By bringing their patrons around back from the front of their establishment, they're bringing the party and the noise that comes with it onto the outdoor deck, patio, stairs, and the parking lot, and essentially into our backyards. The town is arguing over a technicality as to whether the stairs, patio, deck violate the CUP. The fact of the matter is that by routing their patrons to the back, they bring the noise with them and into our residences. Myself and my neighbors are asking that the town follow, at the very least, the intent of the CUP and get their patrons inside and on Santa Cruz Avenue by 11 p.m., if not earlier. We're asking for this change to come as soon as possible, like this weekend, so we may enjoy our backyards again. We do not want to be forced to challenge the CUP. Maybe the owner-operator does not fully understand the impact that routing his patrons to the back has on the neighbors. So please, we are asking that the town and the Los Gatos Bar and Grill work with us and use the front entrance for entering and exiting, unless of course there is a fire. In conclusion, myself and my neighbors would like to see the CUP enforced immediately, get the Los Gatos Bar and Grill patrons to use the front entrance, and bring some peace and quiet to the neighborhood in the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Verga. Any comment from staff regarding this?
Staff is continuing to work with both the neighborhood and the operator of Los Gatos Bar and Grill for the enforcement of the CUP. We do not believe the CUP is crafted, gives us authority to prohibit egress from either the back or the front access point, but the bar and grill is not using their rear deck as called for in the CUP. We are in discussions with Los Gatos Bar and Grill, given the closure of Mountain Charlie's adjacent, that there could be temporary use of alternative egress, but when both business establishments are operating, we actually believe it is in the best public safety interests of the community to have egress from two separate points. So any cure to the rear access would be temporary at best. However, police and community development code enforcement continue to monitor the situation using sound meters and the like to try to resolve the neighborhood concerns.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions from council to Mr. Varga? Thank you, Mr. Varga. Any other members of our public who wish to speak under verbal communications at this time? Seeing none, then we can go to our public hearings. And as we begin our public hearings, I'd just like to make you aware that any speakers who wish to have materials presented or shown on the overhead or otherwise, they need to submit that as part of the public record If you're unable or unwilling to submit the materials, then they should not be shown. Basically, it's just to make sure that what you do say and what you do present are part of the public record. So hope that's clear. If you're going to show something, then leave it with our clerk so it can become part of the record. Our first hearing tonight is item number 8. It's a plan development application PD 11003 for a project located at 15055 and 15075 Los Gatos Boulevard. The property owner and applicant is William Hirschman and Elizabeth Dodson. And we have a staff report by Jennifer Savage.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. There are 2 existing commercial buildings that were approved to be used as retail and office by the town council in 1999, who found that the mix of both retail and office uses were consistent with the town's general plan and the Los Gatos Boulevard plan. Specifically, the plan development required retail use on the entire second floor of the south building and a portion of the second floor on the north building. Because the property slopes downward from Los Gatos Boulevard to the rear of the property, the second floors of the building are at ground level when viewed from Los Gatos Boulevard. In 2001, council confirmed that the second floor retail requirement was part of the plan development approval. The applicant is requesting a plan development amendment to subdivide the building into 11 commercial condominiums and remove the retail requirement by permitting all uses allowed in the underlying CH zone. The applicant's request would require a traffic study. On September 14th, 2011, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the project, provided that the retail requirement remains. The Commission's recommendation does not trigger a traffic study. A finding of community benefit is required both for the applicant's request and the Planning Commission's recommendation. The applicant proposes to contribute monetary funds to the Los Gatos Creekside Sports Park. Staff recommends the funds are allocated towards Oak Meadow Park because upgrades are scheduled sooner for Oak Meadow Park than the development for the Creekside Sports Park. The applicant would prefer that the community benefit be used for the sports park. This concludes staff's presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Savage. Just a comment to staff, or rather to council. The staff provided us with a desk item that references the comparable lease rates for the properties on the boulevard. All right, questions of council? Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This isn't exactly a question. I did ask a question of staff today. It had to do with the Planning Commission recommendations, and if council will look to paragraph number 2, it's making a suggestion that references plan development as recommended by staff. My feeling was that making a motion that references as recommended by staff would be vague in the future, and that simply going to number 3, if that's the way the council wants to go, and referencing attachment 2 would be much more clear. And so I did pose that question to staff, and I did get a response, and I thought maybe we should all share in the response.
Sounds like a good idea. Staff, wish to give us your response?
Council Member Spector's suggestion to reference attachment number 2 is acceptable and would be sufficient.
All right, thank you.
And to further clarify, staff and Planning Commission recommendation are the same in this
Understood,
case.
thank you. Are there comments, questions, or clarifications from staff by council? Seeing none, then we can go to our public. And we have one card for this item, and it would be William Hirschman, who is the applicant. And before Mr. Hirschman begins his presentation, I would like the council to disclose any contacts they've had with the applicant. I myself have had one contact with Mr. Hirschman. We did meet and discussed his project at a certain point in time several weeks ago. Any others? We'll start down here.
I spoke on the phone with Mr. Hirschman.
I met with Mr. Hirschman and spoke on the phone with him more recently.
No disclosure?
No disclosure for myself either.
Thank you. Mr. Hirschman.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been almost, I think, 12 or 15 years since I've been in front of this body. It's a pleasure to be back. This is a fairly straightforward, I believe, application. It really breaks down into two components: the conversion of the building from an office, a standard office building, to a condominium, which I think staff and I believe, unless there's questions relative to that, understands what we're trying to accomplish. It really is quite simple. The building will not change physically at all. The suites that are being suggested will be the suites that we are planning. The existing suites, shall I say, are the suites that would become the condominium units, and it would simply provide for an ownership opportunity versus a rental opportunity within the building. This is somewhat driven by current economics. There are some very exciting interest rates out there these days, and through an SBA loans, what happens is that a tenant can become a buyer of the real estate, and actually their costs will become significantly in some cases, but certainly less than what current rental. I think you've been provided some rental comps, and when interest rates on SBA loans are down in the neighborhood of 4.5–5%, it becomes very attractive to owners to own their own property, which is what kind of drove the concept in this particular building. One of the questions that came up is well, the second part of this is the retail component versus office component versus medical component within the building. We currently have a mix of all of the above as existing tenants. We have medical space, we have retail space, we have general office space. What we're requesting in our application is just to simply allow all the uses within the CH zoning. I want to make it perfectly clear that we are not asking to remove a retail or the ability to have retail within the building. To the contrary, we want to make sure that we keep that ability to have retail. We've owned the building for now going on 11 years, and it's been a struggle over the years to provide retail within that area. I think at the time that we built the structure, it was anticipated that we would sort of be the poster child or model, if you will, for the North 40 development. And we all anticipated that was certainly going to come within the next 3 or 4 years, and it hasn't. And it appears that maybe we're 3 or 4 years away again, maybe sooner. But it's been a long time, and we've struggled. However, we have had retail. We've been successful in some instances of having retail, but we also have had medical, and we've also had general office. And all we're requesting is that we are able to open up the availability of whatever tenant comes our way, or buyer, if you will, comes our way, to be able to rent or sell the space to those individuals. The question came up is our commercial condominiums as they relate to retail. Would turning this building into a retail, or excuse me, a condominium prohibit retail? And I've built myself somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40,000 feet of commercial retail condominiums. So it does not prohibit. To the contrary, the same rules that would apply, or the argument that I give you relative to controlling your costs, applies to a retail tenant too. As you've seen in the downtown, there's been some challenges when rents go up, retaining retail tenants. And being able to control a large portion of a retailer's or an office or a medical office cost is the cost of rent, or the cost of the real estate. And this just adds another alternative. The Planning Commission, as you touched upon, that the Planning Commission suggested to move the project forward, retaining the retail component. However, if you look at the minutes to that meeting, Number one, it was 12:30. And I frankly did a fairly poor job of giving the commission any real reason to do anything other than what their decision was. Commissioner O'Donnell made a good point that although I think his words were, I'm sympathetic to what you're trying to accomplish, you really didn't give us any good reason. And he was correct. I didn't. I think I've laid out a few of the reasons here this evening. And again, our goal and what I want to make sure the council clearly understands is we are not trying to eliminate the retail component. We're just trying to bring in the other uses as potentials. Two other comments. What I'm asking you to do is approve the ordinance, which was attachment 3. I was given just shortly, just a few minutes ago, sort of a recommended amendment to that, which I glanced over very quickly, but it seemed like it was appropriate. Maybe staff, if you haven't seen that, can share it with you. And I believe that it kind of addresses one of the questions we had, and that had to deal with the traffic component. The staff report suggested that we didn't, or that the applicant was avoiding a traffic report. We were not trying to avoid a traffic report. It was brought to our attention fairly late in the process that we may be required, and the reason for that would be that our analysis of the traffic was to look at a worst case condition, which in our particular case would be the entire project being medical. We don't anticipate that the entire project will be medical. We see it as a mix as it stands now. However, to analyze it in the worst case condition, which I feel is the appropriate thing to do, our PM trips would have exceeded the 20 trip limit by 3 trips. To address that, we suggested that we would just put a restriction on one of the units to be general office, which would then bring it down below the 20 trip. I would plead with the council that, and I clearly understand that 20 doesn't mean 21, and I understand that 21 doesn't mean 22. But because of our particular circumstance, depending on how the uses within the building unfold, we may or may not have a requirement. And so that was the reason for I'm just giving you an explanation of the reason for that request. Last, and it's not significant, but it is for us. We suggested that our community benefit would go to the sports park. I have been fortunate over the years that my 3 children have benefited significantly from the sports programs in Los Gatos, and that's just something that we're passionate. Is it a deal breaker as far as we're concerned? No. But if I get to choose, I would love our contribution to go to the sports park. And that was the only reason for our, and I think I covered my points unless there's some questions.
Very good. Let's see if there are questions from council. I do have a question for staff. Did we get a document that indicates this deed restriction issue?
Based on a council inquiry, we did prepare a modified ordinance that we can distribute at this time. It basically provides for that at least 3,326 square feet of the 2 commercial buildings would need to be non-medical office uses, and that would avoid the traffic impact policy requirement for a traffic study. It does eliminate the existing condition, which space has to be designated for retail.
Okay, can I have a comment from the applicant on that issue?
That's what I was trying to explain. He did a little better than I did, but I was trying to explain the reasoning behind that. What I didn't want to, and I said it will definitely fall into Murphy's Law here. If I designate space A as the space not to be medical, certainly it'll be space A that would be the one that would need to be medical. However, I think the way this has been drafted, it leaves us the opportunity opportunity to make that decision a little farther down the road than here this evening when we don't know what the uses are going to be. We're missing the threshold by 3 trips, and that's a function of whether or not the entire building goes medical. So if the council could find it to approve the building for all uses, that would certainly be acceptable, but I clearly understand staff's position. Again, 20 means 20, and it doesn't mean 21, and I understand that.
Thank you. And council, so you can reference the revised ordinance language in the redlined, new language that exists here, and we will take that up a little later. Any other questions? Yes, Madam McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. I'm not sure whether it's for the applicant or for the attorney, but I think this is the first commercial condominium project that we've done, at least in my 9 years up here. So I've been trying to figure out kind of how this works. So if we were to retain the retail requirement, would that have to be on a specific suite and deed restricted, just as if we don't retain the retail, but we wanted to incorporate the non-medical, that has to be on a specific suite at some point and deed restricted? I'm looking at her,
question
but
for me?
I don't know.
There's a number of ways, and I certainly will defer to the experts on this, but I know enough to get myself in trouble, so I'll respond. There's a number of ways you can do that. Deed restrictions are a little bit differently. I'll use another example that we've provided it within the CC&Rs. You provide some other things within the CC&Rs that for example, the medical use. I mean, how do we keep the parking in line so that a future buyer will know that if I buy this unit, I can only have two doctors. We provide language in the CC&Rs that will protect us really from future buyers not understanding. We can do a similar, or you can deed restrict it. We will have specific units, but we would incorporate it in the CC&Rs as well.
So the way that staff had originally proposed it in the to the Planning Commission and in the proposed ordinance amendment tonight is there'd be a deed restriction on all 11 units. And in talking through that internally, as well as I'm sure with discussions with the applicant, that certainly wasn't the preferred method. So that's when the discussion is that right at the time that applicant files for the condo map, the condominium map, that staff would propose that at that time, the particular square footage gets designated, the number of unit or units get designated at that time when he's already that far down the line. The challenge with the restriction in the CC&Rs is the town's not a party to the CC&Rs, and we really don't have the ability, nor has the town ever taken enforcement action on CC&Rs. The town considers that really to be a contractual obligation between the property management, the property owners, and certainly not the town. It would be unusual for our town to go in and try and enforce private CC&Rs, so that wouldn't be the recommendation. The recommendation, if the council decides to retain the retail use, is to have the owner or applicant designate the appropriate square footage at the time, at or about the time in conjunction with the filing of the map, and then file a deed restriction on only those unit or units that would be impacted. Likewise, if the council were inclined to allow the applicant tonight for the myriad of uses with the least limited restriction, the other way is instead of designating the 8,000, wait, I'm getting double numbers. The 8,933 square footage for retail, if there was an inclination, then staff has suggested one of the alternatives to be designating 3,326 square feet for non-medical office use, and again, letting the applicant at the time or close in time to the filing of the condominium map designate just that square footage and restrict it by a deed restriction so that all potential buyers, the first buyer, subsequent buyers, would have sufficient notice and it would be recorded against that property.
May I respond,
Please.
Mr. Mayor? I agree. We can certainly make those restrictions, for lack of a better word, on the condominium plan. The town attorney is correct. I mean, they do review that. That is a recorded document. The CC&Rs is a recorded document as well, but they don't get involved in that. And that's a very easy place to do that. My question to council would be if we move forward with that, then if for some reason we would come back in after the fact and want to, in the event that there is a medical user, for example, that wants that 3,300 square feet, would that require a PD amendment, or is that something that could be handled at a lower level? Really what it has to do with the traffic impact. And after the North 40 is analyzed, I'm sure we'll find that we're an insignificant portion of that. But again, I understand. So a question I would have of staff or the council would be how an amendment to that might take place down the road.
Okay, can staff answer that question?
Council could give direction to the staff as part of your decision tonight to either have the applicant file a PD amendment or to delegate that to staff to make minor changes in the deed restriction so long as it met the council's intent of whatever square footage you determine tonight.
All right, thank you. Madam McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I had one other question. Mr. Hirschman, we got some information that about retail rental rates are generally higher than rental rates for office. Does it also follow then that condominium prices for rental would be higher than condominium prices for office?
Condominium prices for retail? Did you mean? You said rental. Did you mean retail?
I meant retail, sorry. Too many R words here.
There's a lot of factors that come into play there. There will be, during a market period, you'll find sometimes that an office rental will be higher than a retail rental, or a medical office rental may be higher than it varies over time, and we certainly have seen that in the last 10 years. A condominium, however, is really more of a real estate value-driven type of transaction. It's not as we haven't found it to be as fluctuating a curve. So to answer your question, I wouldn't foresee that a buyer of a retail condominium would be any different than a buyer of an office. From a developer point of view, it doesn't matter. As long as the mix of the uses, and it makes some sense, obviously, but I do not see that as being any more or less. It has to do with location of the real estate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Leonardis?
I was just going to ask Mr. Hirschman if you could provide an example of a retail condominium owner. I'm very familiar with medical office condos, but I don't have any general knowledge of the retail.
A user, do you mean? A buyer
Yes.
of a?
Yes, who would that be?
Probably the oldest and best example, we've done quite a bit of them in San Jose. And we've had, oh boy, restaurants. Restaurants are a key factor because of the amount of improvements that a restaurant will put in a facility. Being able to own those improvements versus, 10 years from now, your lease runs out and you're stuck with a lot of improvements. We've had real estate offices. I know that depending on your definition of retail, but salons or travel agents we've had, restaurants, as I've said. One of the better examples, I think, if you're familiar, there's project that was built by Harrington Kulikoff in Mountain View on El Camino 30 years ago. It was called Two Worlds, and it has been a successful retail condominium project for now going on almost 30 years. They're pretty successful. What it does is it tends to ground the retailer to the space for obvious reasons. They've made a commitment and purchased. So there really isn't any retailer can really use a space. It's really no different than renting, except you have the ability to own.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments for the applicant? The document we just received, should we designate this attachment 3A for purposes of future reference? Because I think 2A? Okay. So that is attachment 2A. Should we need to reference back to that later on? All right. I don't think there are any more questions. Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Mayor,
yes.
and just to clarify, so you have 3 actionable ordinances in front of you. Attachment 2 is the Staff and Planning Commission recommendation. Attachment 2A is the variation presented tonight. Attachment 2 would have precluded or would have required retail in the specified square footage. Attachment 2A would require a specified square footage of non-medical to avoid the traffic study, and attachment 3 is as requested by the applicant and would require an exemption from the traffic policy.
All right, thank you. Now, I don't have any other cards. Is anyone else in our public interested in speaking to this issue? Seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing and look to council for comments, questions, discussion, or a motion. I can wait them out. Councilwoman McNutt?
Get impatient here, so let's get this going. So I was thinking that maybe this isn't a formal disclosure, but I have to say that I've had an opportunity in the last few months to do some extra reading and research and familiarization with retail, because I find it really fascinating. It's a whole different world than what I am used to, and what makes a successful retailer and the challenges that they have is very different from other kinds of businesses. And so I've been reading books. I've had an opportunity at one point to sit down with a retail economist who walked me through why downtown San Jose keeps failing in terms of a retail center. Fascinating stuff, which I won't go into right now because it would take quite a bit of time, but it's really insightful and sometimes counterintuitive. The overall thing that I've learned from all of this is that retail goes where retail wants to go. And retail will go to a location. When we have a real estate person on council here, they always talk about location, location, location. Retail will go to a location where it will be successful. And you cannot force retail to go to a location if they think it's not going to be successful. In this particular case, in this building, there has been a retail that's worked there, a certain kind of retail. Thank goodness we have edible arrangements in town. They're my gift of choice, when I'm doing a hostess gift kind of thing. So I'm glad to have them there. It's not a good location for In-N-Out Burger or something like that. But I really believe that we should let this space develop and be used in a way that makes sense to the tenants or future buyers. And I believe it's going to continue to be a mix that exists there now of office and retail and medical. And I have no problem with the condo conversion. So given that framework of what I've been learning and thinking about retail, the Planning Commission was fine with the condo conversion. I think they felt a little leery of doing too much about retail because there was a council policy from many, many, many years ago, and they didn't feel like they really had the authority to countermand that. I would like to go in the direction of attachment 2A and just limit that space so there's always some that is non-medical, just to make that kind of guarantee. And I would prefer to have the money go to the sports park because it gets started tomorrow, and I don't think there's anything faster than that planned for Oak Meadow. So, and I kind of have my heart set on the sports park. So that's kind of where I am on those three issues, and I'm not really going to do a motion right now. I'd like to get at least one or two other council members to comment before I do a motion.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Well, I was kind of struggling with a similar issue of trying to define what the council of 1999 was thinking when they set this up the way they set it up. Although I haven't had a lot of in-depth conversations with retail consultants, it certainly seems that retail goes where retail goes, and it's successful where it's successful. I wasn't really comfortable with the language we had in attachment 3. I do think that attachment 2A may solve some of the problems. I want to read through it for a second while we're listening to the other council members. But I think also the Planning Commission was constrained or felt constrained, probably rightly so, by what was already written in the ordinance. So that's why it comes to us anyway for a PD modification. And then, like the Planning Commission and Councilmember McNutt, I have no problem with the condo conversion aspect of it whatsoever. So that's kind of where I am at the moment.
Thank you. Other members? Mr. Leonardis?
I was just going to say that I think this presents some opportunities for retailers to have an ownership interest, and I like the idea of it. I don't believe that this is going to eliminate retail per se. I think the market will take care of itself. I think in the future, depending on what happens with the North 40, which is yet to be still unwritten, who knows what will happen, but if we keep it open to all uses, I think that most of the stuff that faces Los Gatos Boulevard might still remain retail, and it'll give individual retailers, or as Mr. Hirschman stated, some different service businesses an opportunity to own, and I think that would be a good thing. So generally, I would be supportive of the concepts presented here this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Spector?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of this is easy. The sports park, the new Creekside Sports Park, that's a good one. And we are starting that tomorrow. And as I agree with, I think, Ms. McNutt, you can't get any more quick than that. I don't disagree with anything anybody has said. I believe that the timing will be such that it might be that these condominiums will be purchased, could very well be purchased by non-retail uses before they have the advantage of enjoying the benefits of the North 40. So that would be my only concern, but not enough to disagree with the concepts that have been put before us.
Well, I don't want to be repetitive, but I do believe that the Planning Commission got it right in that they saw the approval of the condominium conversion as appropriate, and when it came to the issue of retail, they noted appropriately that it's the council's call, that they could not see to overturn that component, that it did rest with the council given our previous resolutions. And so in that regard, they were constrained and appropriately constrained. But from my perspective, I think that as the signator of the earlier resolutions, because I was here when that all happened, there was a whole different thought about what was going to take place out there on the north part of Los Gatos Boulevard, and the assumption that the North 40 project will be moving ahead relatively quickly, at least in government terms. And that, as Mr. Hirschman pointed out in his comments, that this was seen as kind of a model or a initial starting point from which the rest of the boulevard frontage would develop. There was an alley that was supposed to run the length of the boulevard. There were supposed to be retail uses on the street, again with the perception that in 3 or 4 years this would back up into a complete project. 11 years later, we see where we are. And I think that it's significant that as we look at this, as we're moving through this process, we really need to recognize the fact that things didn't evolve that way. And there isn't a dynamic out there that really promotes retail. And until such time as that North 40 project begins to take shape and form, then it really should be driven, what occurs in this particular property should be driven by market forces. And the market will therefore determine what will be the most appropriate use. I think we can trust the market in this regard. So I would encourage a member of council to make a motion. I would be inclined to agree to attachment 2A, which seems to me to be the most appropriate evolution of the proposal to this time. Is there a motion to be made? Vice Mayor.
I'll go ahead and make a motion, first of all, to that I can make the required findings as given to us in attachment 1, and approve the plan development application PD 11-003 as represented in attachment 2A. And I will add to that I am fine with the applicant's desire that his community benefit go towards the Los Gatos Creekside Sports Park.
All right. There is a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Further discussion. Manager wishes to comment.
I would like to ask the clerk administrator to read the title and then incorporate in the council's motion the waiving of the full reading of the ordinance.
Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending ordinance number 2060 at 15055 and 15075 Los Gatos Boulevard, APN 424-07-096, to allow commercial condominiums and modify permitted uses.
All right. Is that sufficient, Mr. Manager?
That is sufficient, and we'd also like to highlight 2A we gave you
Correct.
is only the change pages, and included in the council motion would be incorporation of the unmodified pages of Ordinance 2.
That'd be correct.
That was an assumption. Right. All right. So we have a motion, a second, and clarification. And do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Hirschman. That brings us to item number 9. This is an architecture and site application S11001. The property is located at 16161 Short Road. The property owner is John and L.V. Scott. The applicant is Chris Spalding. And we have appellants Robert and Lois Mallison and David Clark and Deborah Fetters. Now, for information, let me just kind of set the stage for our process. This is approved application from the Planning Commission. It comes to council on appeal. The appellants, as I have noted, will have the opportunity to make a presentation at the beginning, since they are making the appeal. They will have 10 minutes to make their appeal, and then the applicant will follow with, again, 10 minutes to comment to their position as applicants. We will open to the public at that point for further comment, and then once the public has had its opportunity, we will call back the applicant initially for a 5-minute rebuttal, and then the last voice will be the appellants for a 5-minute rebuttal. So that's how the process is going to work, and I'd invite anyone among our public to present a card to our clerk should you wish to speak to this item. And again, the 10 minutes is self-contained with all of those people who are representatives of either the appellant or the applicant. So we must constrain ourselves. So watch your time in there. The timer is going to tell you when you, I think, have about 1 minute to go, something like that. So those are the ground rules. I hope we all clearly understand, and I'd ask the staff to present. Ms. Marnie Mosley is going to make the presentation, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The The property 16161 Short Road is located 350 feet south of Old Blossom Hill Road, situated behind 16141, 16171, and 16207 Short Road. It is accessed by a driveway easement over 16171 Short Road. The applicant is requesting to demolish and rebuild a single-family residence. The proposed residence would be sited in primarily the same location as the existing structures. The proposed residence would include 3,329 square feet of living area, along with a 780 square foot three-car attached garage, in addition to the existing detached second unit. The proposed FAR and house size are well within the range of homes on both Mary Way and Short Road. And of the 10 properties directly contiguous to the site, 6 are 2 stories and of similar height to the proposed residence. The application was considered by the Planning Commission on June 22nd, 2011, and August 24th, 2011. Based on direction from the Planning Commission at the June 22nd meeting, the applicant revised the proposed plans to reduce the size of the second story, to increase the height of the windows adjacent to the properties on Mary Way, and to further decrease the maximum height of the residence. The Planning Commission considered the revisions on August 24th, 2011, and approved the application 5-1. The approval was appealed on September 6, 2011, on the basis that the Planning Commission erred or abuses discretion in that the approved residence still blocks views and creates privacy and shadowing concerns for 120 and 116 Mary Way. In addition, the appellant questions the setbacks labeled on the approved plans and the potential impact to the existing cypress trees along the rear of 120 Mary Way. The issues listed by the appellant have been addressed in your staff report and throughout the public hearing process by staff, the applicant, and the Planning Commission. In addition, one of the major issues of discussion throughout the public hearing process was in regards to drainage concerns. The subject site and surrounding properties have long-standing drainage issues. The applicant is proposing to address the existing drainage concerns, as well as handling the increase in impervious surface for the new residents. The applicant's current drainage plan relies on the residence being a 2-story in order to reduce additional impervious surface, as well as provide the necessary area to install the required stormwater facilities on site. A single-story residence of similar size would increase the impervious surface and require a substantially different stormwater management design that may not be as effective during larger storm events. Staff recommends that the council deny the appeal, find that the Planning Commission did not err or abuse its discretion, and adopt the resolution provided in Attachment 10. This completes staff's report. We are here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Questions for staff? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question I had regarding the access road and the width of it. The code, I believe, should be 12 feet. I went out there with a tape measure and it was about 10 feet. I know that we're looking at potentially 15 feet of width out there, but I understand that there has to be some kind of adjustment to that easement. I just wonder what the status of that is currently.
One of the conditions of approval is that the driveway, the actual paved driveway, would be brought up to current requirements. The town attorney, I believe, can speak better to where the standing of the access easement between the applicant and the neighbor sits.
We'll defer to the applicant, but we've been led to believe that the parties have worked out the easement.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions for staff? Ms. McNutt?
I'm sorry, it wasn't a question. I just
Or
want to know if you
comment.
wanted disclosures now before the...
Just yet.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Any other comments or questions for staff? All right. I do have a question regarding the desk item, okay? And council, you do have a desk item in front of you. This particular issue of drainage, would you clarify the swimming pool as calculated within the concept of the drainage appropriate to the site? Because there was some comment made earlier that, or in the documents, that a swimming pool would be impervious surface.
I'm going to let our engineering staff refer to that question.
The swimming pool, according to our requirements, they are considered as impervious area, but then it's not calculated within the C3 guidelines because in a way they do, with a large storm event, they do collect and contain some of the water.
All right, so they are considered impervious.
That's right, but it's not calculated toward the total calculation of storm drain calculation because it doesn't create any more storm drain flow from the pool to adjacent neighborhood.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions? Then let's do our disclosures. I've met with both the applicant and the appellant, and the appellant's neighbor, I believe, or, well, we'll talk about who are the appellants when we get to that point. Any other disclosures? We'll start down at this end.
Thank you. I met with the Mallisons. I visited the Mallisons at their home. I visited Dr. Fetters and Dr. Clark at their home. I met with the Scotts, and I visited the site.
Thank you.
I met with the Mallisons at their home, Dr. Fetters at her home, and the Scotts on the site, and walked the site.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I met with the Scotts. I met with the Mallisons. I spoke with Dr. Federer by phone. I visited the Mallison home, specifically the deck on the second floor, and I went to the site itself.
Mine will largely be the same as the others. I met with the Fetters and the Clarks in their home. I met with the Mallisons at their home. And I met with the Scotts, and I visited the site.
All right. So that's it for the disclosures. No more info from staff at this point in time? All right. Then we're going to ask the appellants to come forward. Okay, the appellants have their first 10 minutes. And I would remind you, anyone who is indicated as part of the appellant team must present within the 10 minutes allotted for the appellants. And that would include, as the staff report indicates, Robert and Lois Mallison, David Clark, and Deborah Fetters are the appellants. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to come forward, and you can sit in the front pew if you wish, and present your particular position. And when you come to the mic, please introduce yourself for our
Good evening.
audience.
My name is David Clark. I live at 116 Mary Way. Thank you all for allowing us to speak here tonight, Mr. Mayor, council members, and thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedules to meet with us at our homes. It's a pretty straightforward issue. Behind us for a number of years, it's been a relatively small house. The lot was purchased, and now there's plans for a house of approximately, twice the size. You've heard the square footage. When the proposed residence was on the table, the plans were brought to us by the Scotts. We've looked them over. They've been very cooperative in listening to our concerns. The concerns mostly have to do with the fact that what used to be a little bit of a view is being obstructed a little bit. The Scotts have cleared away some of the foliage from trees that are on their lot that go to the left of our backyard. And they've lowered the original height of their house, I think 18 inches, but correct me if I'm wrong. Nevertheless, it's a house that's significantly larger than the house that was there before. It does obstruct our view. And in about a year from now, when the foliage that was cut away and now allows us a little bit of view of the hills, when that comes back down, whomever it is that owns the house, I don't know if they'll be as cooperative in keeping the foliage clear there, and then the existing house will still be there. I have a two-story house. My neighbors have a two-story house. The Scotts are well within their rights to build a two-story house. I'm fine with all that. I have a 20-foot setback. They have a 15-foot setback. It's an old law. It is the way it is. I guess I would just ask the council to look at those circumstances. There are many ways to deal with the same problem. Could the house be moved in a slightly different area? Could part of the house be taller or shorter? I think those sort of considerations are important in terms of mitigating the obstructive view from our residents.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
My name is Bob Mallison, and I live at 120 Mary Way. And the reason I requested the appeal was that I felt the Planning Commission did not really evaluate this project from the homes on Mary Way. I requested them to come and take a look at how this structure impacts my home. And I know they're not allowed to talk to people, but they don't really have to talk, they just have to look. There are 9 properties that surround this lot, and the majority, or 10 I heard today, the majority of the owners are opposed to a 2-story structure because of its effect on their neighborhood. I personally am opposed because of the height of the structure that blocks the view of the foothill to the east. The 2020 general plan talking about new developments for Los Gatos states input from surrounding resident and property owners is a major consideration during any development process. The letters that opposed this project from the other adjacent properties was not given a major consideration. And my last comment concerns the great guidelines that the town has regarding maintaining views. Quotes, new homes will consider the views, privacy, and solar access to the neighboring properties. These are great guidelines. So my question is, why are they being ignored in this case? My feeling is if you have guidelines, they should be followed. And if they aren't going to be followed, they should be changed or abandoned. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the appellants at this time? Seeing none, you will have another 5 minutes at the end to make your last pitch, okay? Then we'll ask the applicant to come forward, and I have 2 cards for the applicant. Terrence, I should be able to do this because I have a Z and a Y in my name too. You're gonna make me suffer, aren't you?
It's on there, sir. It's on there phonetically.
Okay. How about Shevchek?
Yeah.
I had that down at the beginning. It's not a problem. Okay.
But I'm going to start.
That's not fair. But you do have 10 minutes.
Okay. Chris Spalding, architect.
Okay.
So let me just give a quick summation of why we put the house where we put it. We located the house, the site has an interesting midpoint access. We're required to have a fire apparatus turnaround. We have mature redwood trees, an existing secondary dwelling that we want to keep. So with all those constraints, that's where the house ended up where it ended up. There's not a whole lot of leeway. We could move it a little bit further to the south, but I don't think that helps the Mallisons' view at all. What we tried to do is, when I first designed this, I was trying to protect their privacy and view as much as possible. Didn't do a very good job, apparently, in their view. So initially, at DRC level, we lowered the whole house 18 inches, and then at the Planning Commission's behest, we redesigned the second story to reduce the size of the house, reduce the amount that the second story blocked the views and the shadows and the privacy. So if you look at, I think it's the second sheet in your packet from our drawings, there's a comparison of the views. It shows our first Planning Commission hearing blocked 40 degrees out of the original 90-degree view from Mary Way, from 120 Mary Way. And then we reduced that, the second story, by 14.5 feet in width, so that the new revised design only blocks 30 degrees out of their original 90-degree view. From 116 Mary Way, the portion of the house that's in front of them is just one story and 9 feet from grade to eave line and a 4 and 12 pitch. So it's hard to make that any shorter than it already is. As far as privacy goes, if you look at our elevations, particularly on sheet A5, the west elevation, which is the one that looks towards Mary Way, we only have 2 windows with a 6-foot in the master bedroom. There's a 6-foot sill height. And the other window is in the toilet room. So I don't think there's any privacy issues from our second story. If you look at our shadow study, in reducing the height, initially the shadows were both on 116 and 120 Mary Way. We've reduced them on both. It's still early on in the winter. It still shades a bit of 116, but it's completely off of 120 at this point. The size, we reduced the overall size of the house. Living area now is 3,329 square feet. The second story is only 1,223. The complainant's house is larger than this one, even though their lot is 3 times smaller. So it's hard to say that this is too big of a house when it's a much larger lot, and yet it's a smaller house than the people complaining, who also have a 2-story house, and whose second story is larger than our proposed second story. We also, at the behest of the Planning Commission, increased the second story setback to 20 feet. Also, in terms of setbacks, our original drawing was a little confusing because we have the existing buildings setbacks indicated on the plans, and that confused people. So the new proposed building is a 15-foot setback for the first story, which is the code requirement, and then we set back the second story an additional 5 feet to 20 feet, which would be the same as the required 2-story setback for the zone district, the R18 zone district that Mary Way is. So in that regard, this building is very similar to the allowable massing and setbacks of the houses to the west. So in other words, it's compatible with that zone district, even though it's in the R140 zone district and theoretically could allow a much bigger house. So this house is a lot smaller than it could have been. So I mean, the applicants, my clients, did not try to build it out to the maximum. A lot of people do that, and that's not the case here. They willingly kept it considerably below the maximum allowable. The engineer wants to say a few words about the drainage.
I believe that would be Mr. Shuvchek.
Yeah.
I needed to do that.
It's a little bit washed up. I'm Terry Shevchek, civil engineer on the project. If we were to go to a 1-story house, the additional 1,200 square feet would be generally this area.
Mrs. Shevchek, will you take the mic with you if you're going to go over and point that out?
Would be extending into this area here, which would reduce the size of the rear yard to something that's very much incompatible with the other lots directly adjacent. There's some other complications too, in that we would introduce a drainage system that could potentially infiltrate the crawl space of the house, causing either moisture damage or additional mildew and mold under the house in the crawl space. So the three components that we presently have for storm drainage include dry wells, which are deep, vertical, drilled wells that include drain rock. Secondly, we have some perimeter drainage ditches that are actually about 4 to 6 foot trenches with drain rock. And thirdly, we're building a berm in the southwest corner that would actually trap surface water. So all of this is somewhat elaborate, but it's done to negate the need to connect to the existing 48-inch storm drain, which is right across property line. The reason being is that to contribute to this drainage that enters that storm drain would probably exacerbate existing problems in the neighborhood, and this was the best self-contained solution that would take care of the drainage consistent with current law. Now, again, if we were to increase the size of the house to 1 story or use a 1-story footprint, we would lose 1,200 square feet of pervious area, and we'd put the house that much closer, probably 30 feet to all of those storm drainage components. And it's just not a good practice to have that much drainage that close to the house. So that's the issue with the storm drainage. I wanted to clarify 2 other quick points. One, the proposed driveway will be widened. There's certain slivers of additional pavement that are required to get it to a 12-foot width, so the widening's about foot and a half here and there. And with the swimming pool, it's actually connected to a sanitary sewer. In the old days, swimming pools used to just discharge into a storm drain, but today it's connected with a pump to the sanitary sewer, and that's another reason why it doesn't contribute to the storm drainage runoff. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if needed.
Council, do you have questions? Technically speaking, you're going to have 5 more minutes to rebut anything that's been said in the public. And so far, we haven't had anyone in the public speak because no one has turned in a card. So I invite any member of our public who wishes to speak to this issue on either side, please forward a card at this point. Seeing none, then we will allow another 5 minutes, but we're going to get some questions from council. Don't worry.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry.
Oh, yeah?
I wanted to ask Mr. Spalding a question before the applicant left. You made a statement that you said something like, I suppose we could move the house south a little bit, but you didn't think that would have a real solution. What's a little bit?
Well, it would move the further into the Mallison's view, I would believe. So I don't know that that's a solution.
Okay, so it would be really helpful if we had some overheads up, but I'm not sure what
I can
have
put
to.
one up.
Well, I'm trying to figure out if you have. Oh, no, that's not a good one. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if.
It's possible to move it this way, but I think their best view is this way. I mean, you went to their house and looked.
I did.
So I think this view corridor is their better view. So moving it that way is probably not in their interest.
Perhaps I'll have a question of the appellant when they come back up. Thank you.
I have another card here for the applicant, Mr. Gallardi. Okay. Any other questions at this point before we go to the last 5 minutes? It's kind of convoluted since we're not talking about a lot of our public who are speaking in the interim period here. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Spalding. as well. Just borrowing a page from Councilwoman McNutt's comments, I thought, since the house, there's a home been sitting there since whatever, 1940, and it's, the front door faces east, and now the front door is going to face, I guess, north. And I thought, if the house is torn down, the setback would have to be like 20 feet on the first floor. But since the doorway was changed, I guess you're using the side setback. Is that?
The orientation of the door doesn't affect the setback orientation.
So, follow-up question. In other words, if the backyard was essentially isn't there a minimum requirement of 20 feet for the?
Well, in this zone district, the backyard's larger than 20 feet. It's the R18 zone district, which is Mary Way, that's a 20-foot rear. But the setbacks for this zone district and this parcel are arrayed in the manner that's most appropriate for the shape of the lot, because it's a flag lot.
Okay, so I understand where you're coming from with that. The other question I had was, looking at the house, is this going to be a slab foundation all the way through, or is it going to be?
No, it's a raised floor, but we've lowered it down into grade as far as possible. So it's essentially on the front of the house, it's the same height as a slab floor would be.
Okay.
If it was slab. So we can't go any more, we can't push the house any further into grade, or we would put it into a depression.
And last but not least, one other question. The concerns of the neighbors at 116, their concern was the length of the garage, being from its existing 2-car going out to 3-car. It's really that third door that disturbed them. And I was just wondering if the garage, more of that could be moved forward. Looking at the plan here, you have the 3 doors side by side, but I was just thinking, was there a way to make a tandem length and a single?
No, I mean, with our fire apparatus turnaround, we're kind of there's not much room to maneuver that between the setback in the back and the turnaround in the front. We don't have much room to move the garages.
All right, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant? Now, we're going to go to the 5 minutes for the applicant's rebuttal, if you will. And during those 5 minutes, it'll give us an opportunity to ask any final questions, and then you'll get the last word, okay? Mr. Ghilardi, you're going to present.
I'm Benjamin Ghilardi. I'm a friend of John and Avi Scott for 26 years. I also happen to be a registered architect in the state of Florida and California, but I am practicing as a realtor. I was the one that helped them purchase the property. They love the property. They want to make it their home. They have done everything in their power to design a home that is compatible with the site and take every neighbor's concern into account. Please note, in normal circumstances, you have about 3 or 4 neighbors that are concerned about the property immediately surrounding it. But this time, because of the physical shape of the property, it was 10 properties that were concerned. And they all came forth, expressed their concerns. Mr. and Mrs. Scott met with every single one of them, and none of them are here, except the Mallisons, whom are the supposedly most affected by their design and their home. Mallisons have enjoyed their home for 40 years, knowing that they have lived behind a site that is a half-acre large with 2 substandard homes. Mrs. Scott came along, purchased the property, and did everything in their power to minimize the impact on them by 3 times going through revisions and costs and delays of months doing so. My claim is that Mr. and Mrs. Mallison are not satisfiable. because they have enjoyed their home in their age and place in life. They like to be able to spend the rest of their days spending their lives next to a park. But unfortunately, economically, it is not possible to be able to exercise the right of ownership of property and satisfy them at the same time. Mr. and Mrs. Mallison have already chosen their circumstance about views and privacy by choice. They have entombed themselves within approximately 17 feet of cypress trees, which dictates that they do not care about views. They do not care. They do absolutely want impeccable privacy. So right now what we are left with, and that's what makes them completely unsatisfiable, is to make sure that you don't build anything behind them. They're saying a 1-story instead of a 2-story in order to be able to say they're reasonable. But the fact is they want everything to stay status quo, just like it is. But unfortunately, that is not possible. And the Planning Commission has beaten to the subject to death and analyzed it and made Mr. and Mrs. Scott go through a heck in a hand to pay the cost and time to be able to give them a house that would take best care of their concerns. And their concern is very unreasonable and maybe unsatisfiable. Thank you for your time.
Okay, anyone else from the applicant side wish to speak? If you are, you should turn a card in, sir.
Okay, I can write a card.
But just you can write the card after you speak.
Okay, John Scott, I want to address the right-of-way. We've been working with the Vorises to...
Would you move the mic over, sir?
We've been working with the Vorises, who are our neighbors, over which the access road, whose land it goes over. And we've reached agreement on what the new easement should look like. It's going through the process now of having the banks sign the subordination, and then it will be recorded. So that is the status on that. It should be done very quickly as soon as the banks sign up.
All right, thank you, sir, for that clarification. Any other comments from the applicant side? Seeing none, then I'm going to call the appellants back. And you would again have 5 minutes to make any further comments or last comments to us, and then to receive questions from council. Okay?
I guess that my concerns still are that that view that we've had for 40 years is being blocked. We had a 180-degree view of that foothill, and now we have probably about a 30-degree view. I have no concerns about the size of the house. I don't know why we keep getting comparisons to the size of our house and the size of the proposed structure. I don't care how many square feet it is. I care about the height of the structure. And the other thing is that according to their surveyor, the fence that's shown here is actually 1 foot inside the property line. And some of the drawings indicate that the setback is 15 feet, but it's 15 feet from the fence and not 15 feet from the property line. So that should be clarified. As for people building homes, I have no concerns about that. It's just the height. David?
Okay, no other comments? All right. I would point out to council, we did receive an item that came to us on submission from the Mallisons. They were not able to make the deadline to have it submitted as a desk item, but it was submitted by them subsequent to that and brought to us tonight. All right. Questions from council for, I'm going to consider the appellant still open to questions. I haven't closed the public hearing as yet. Okay. Any questions? Yes, Madam McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask the Mallisons, whichever one wants to come to the microphone, their opinion on my question to the architect, if the house were shifted south, I don't know how many feet that would be, would that improve or inhibit your view more?
I mean, it would depend to some extent, I think, on how far it would be moved.
Well, I know you would like it to be moved 20 feet south, but, you know, if, but a smaller increment. Do you have any sense at all as to what that would be?
I don't think it's really going to help that much.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the appellants? Seeing none, oh, I'm sorry, there is one, Mr. Leonardis.
I'll throw this out there, perhaps as a compromise, but not to complicate things. And maybe, you know, this might be better suited for the architect as well. But I thought, what if the whole project were shifted 5 feet east towards where the driveway, so it's actually a little bit further away from your house, and if that's possible, would that be satisfactory to everybody?
It would be helpful.
Thank you. All right, no further questions? Then we're going to close the public hearing, and I look to the council for comments, discussion, further clarifications of staff, or a motion. Ms. Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sort of going to talk to myself for a second because my thinking on this application evolved over time. And when I was just looking at the paperwork, the reports, and watching the Planning Commission, my thoughts were, okay, what do we have as a given? That a flag lot exists, that one can build upon that flag lot, and that the flag lot is not configured in the same way as the remainder of the other neighborhoods. And so therefore, I consider the comparison with the flag lot and the other neighborhoods not especially compelling. What was not a given was the square footage of the proposed home and the height of the proposed home. Again, still looking at the staff report, I saw that the applicant wanted a 3,500 plus square foot home with 2 stories, no basement, 2-car, maybe 3-car, a large garage, lawn and swimming pool on the south. And so those were my thoughts, no conclusions, but those were my thoughts until I went to visit the Mallison home yesterday. And what impressed itself upon me was I did not realize the impact on their view when walking the length of their whatever you want to call it, balcony on the 2nd floor. And it was a significant blockage. What does that mean as far as the decision we're making this evening? I don't know, but it was certainly more than I had anticipated in looking at the paperwork and listening to the Planning Commission.
Okay, other comments from council? Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor.
One of the things that caught me when I met with the 2 appellants was actually a conflicting perspective of the 4 of you. I certainly understand the Mallison's concern of preferring a single-story house. However, that would push the house out and it causes drainage issues and other things that other neighbors would have to address. And then when I met with Ms. Fetters, the one thing that she impressed upon me was that she wasn't worried about the 2 stories, but she didn't want the house stretched out any further because it would block more of their views. And so one wanted 2 stories, but not pushed one way, and one wanted 1 story and pushed out. And as we often have here, we have people with different perspectives, we have competing values, and I'm somewhat concerned by the neighbors that aren't here, but that we saw evidence on the in the prior hearings from the other neighbors with regards to drainage, and it appears that the drainage issues would be exacerbated by a single-story house. So I'm concerned about where that could lead us as well. I'm not ready to make a motion yet, but I was struck by Planning Commissioner Jensen's comment that the applicant has done everything the Planning Commission has asked them to do, and I found a somewhat persuasive argument. So I'm open to hearing from the other council members.
I would remind the council that this is an approval by the Planning Commission that was appealed, and we are somewhat limited in the positions we can take to if there was an error or abuse of discretion on the part of the commission, or new information that was submitted at the council during the appeal process that was not available to the Planning Commission of a significant nature. Or finally, if it was a policy over which the commission had no discretion to modify or address. And I believe the appeal was based on commission error. I think it's primarily is how that was framed. So it would be significant to us if we were to overturn the Planning Commission that one of those was evident. I would say that, from my perspective, in listening to the Planning Commission or actually reading their verbatim minutes, that it was obvious that in I believe it was a 5-1 vote, that the one vote in opposition was a commissioner who felt that the size of the structure was too large. And if the size of the structure were reduced, then that might accommodate the needs. At the same time, we do have in the rest of the testimony of the commission the evident agreement that the applicant has fulfilled all the expectations that the town has come in under FAR, or the restrictions of FAR, has made attempts to modify the plan to accommodate the issue of privacy, which is one of the things that we're concerned about, and to do some accommodation for hillside views. It puts us in a position to basically say what is left outstanding. I think what I see is that given the fact that the drainage issue, which has been a constant with that neighborhood, given the hillside and the slope of the hillside, that is being mitigated by the plans that are in front of us. That there has been some movement to reduce the height of the house, to reduce the second-story mass, and to accommodate those things that are unique to this particular property, since this is a property that is a buildable lot, but certainly non-conforming. I put that together as I'm reviewing the plans, and I grant, standing on your second-story balcony at your throne, at the major place where you take your coffee in the morning, Mr. Mallison, I see that structure in front of me. And I think that what I'm inclined, as I look at the objections raised, and I see the modifications made by the applicant to accommodate the objections raised, I'm more and more convinced that what really is remaining unfulfilled is the fact that you're going to see a house. I mean, there's going to be a house there next to you where there hasn't been a house in the past. And I'm well aware that you have houses on both sides of you. As I look out my kitchen window, I see a house in front of me. We do live in neighborhoods, and that's one of the issues for our living in neighborhoods, is that we do have impacts that are created just by the fact that we live next door to each other. I think that so many of the mitigations that have been made by the applicant have reduced some of those issues for us that were in your presentation initially, that I have difficulty then seeing how in spite of the fact that you have the proposed house that you will now see from your balcony, it's difficult for me to see how we as the legislative body can stand opposed to the application as it currently exists. That is my sense at this time. I'd open to other comments or a motion from any member of council.
Just have a couple
Mr.
comments.
Leonardis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe that the Planning Commission erred either. It's always difficult. If you look at the existing home and its existing position on the lot, it's essentially, I guess, the backyard that lines the fence. And now, essentially, it'll be the side of the house. It's nice that they stepped the top story back to 20 feet. I think they've been very accommodating. It's very difficult. I think of the Mallisons living there for 40 years and the other neighbors, and having to deal with change that comes along, and sometimes it's not so easy to accept that. But given that this owner or this future owner has worked well within the guidelines and the Planning Commission's findings, I find it difficult to just say no. I empathize with the view from your balcony being partially obstructed, but at the same time, I don't know if our airspace is permanently guaranteed in some regards. I don't know how we can deny the new owners right to their living space to protect your view. I just struggle with that, so I'm leaning towards the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardis. Any other comments? Mr. Vice Mayor?
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion, and I, like Councilmember Leonardis, I empathize with your situation. I'm just not sure that there's a better solution than what's already been put forth, and I think the Planning Commission did yeoman's work here to get it where the privacy issue, I don't believe, is an issue. I think that certainly the view shed is affected, but I think I'm not sure there's a way to build on a legal buildable lot that wouldn't be that way. So I'm going to move to deny the appeal and uphold the decision of the Planning Commission to approve architecture and site application S11-001.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Leonardis seconds it. Any further discussion? Yes.
Well, I suppose I'm going to have to vote. I don't really want to, because as it's one of those cases, and I have to tell you, this is my least favorite kind of issue to come before us, and I say that every time a neighbor-to-neighbor issue comes before us, because I do understand the frustration and impatience that the applicant has, and the feeling that they've done everything they can to be cooperative with the neighbors. I understand the fear and the just the pain of losing the lifestyle that you've had and which you've enjoyed for many years or a few years and with your family. So in those kinds of cases, it always just has to come down to what is legal and what we can do within the constraints of the law and of our process. And as has been mentioned earlier, it was approved by the Planning Commission. We would have to find that there was error or abuse, and I have not heard evidence to support that. I would much have preferred, that's why I was fumbling around a little bit trying to find a solution here, which is not a good idea at the dais, but out of a last hope here, that there was some way to do some adjustment. I would much have preferred that there would be some solution that would have allowed everyone to, if at least not be happy, to at least feel a little bit more comforted as we go into the next step. So sadly, reluctantly, I will be supporting the motion, and I really hope that all of the neighbors continue to try to work together to see if there's any modifications to make this a better situation for all of them.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Blechter?
Thank you. This is a very uncomfortable decision. And so whenever you have facts that are so troublesome, because I actually was very surprised when I saw the impact on the Mellisons. And do I think that there are potential solutions? Yes. For example, a house that isn't 3,511 square feet. But that being said, whenever you have these kinds of difficult decisions, I always go back to what our laws and our policies are, and as the mayor and others have pointed out, we would have to find an error or abuse of discretion on the part of the Planning Commission. Although they may have gone either way, I don't think the way they went was an error. So I am going to very uncomfortably, because of the Mellison situation, be supporting the motion.
All right, any further comments? Yes, Mr. Leonardis?
I'm just going to say I don't think this was easy for any of us, as far as comfort level. And again, it all comes down to the process, the rules, and personal property rights. And, as we move forward with this, again, it's just not easy. It's very difficult, but we must move forward. So.
All right, further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. We have a second resolution.
Yeah, I'll move to adopt the resolution denying the appeal of the Planning Commission decision to approve the architecture and site application on property zoned R120 as referenced in attachment 10.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. And that is our last hearing for the night. The meeting's adjourned.